one of the operating systems. Right? The Linux Foundation is a bit more than that, which we'll go into. So there is this project going on, which is what we want to talk about. There is also something called Hyperledger Fabric, which is some code, some technology, which has been donated by IBM, and initially I think Digital Asset and Consensus, and then Blockchain. I'm not sure what happened there. It was donated to this project. So coming out of here, if there's one thing to take away, it's that you talk about the Hyperledger project or Hyperledger Fabric. One's a project and one's a technology. They're very different things. So we're going to just introduce them. End of slideshow. That's it. Done. Thank you very much.
That was quick.
Yeah. So firstly, what is the Linux Foundation? It's an organization. It's an organization for developers and companies to build ecosystems that accelerate open technology development and commercial adoption. Just Linux. What do you get if you can become a member of the Linux Foundation? You pay subscriptions based generally on your company's size, and you get stuff for that. What do you get? You get kind of compliance in open source licensing and understanding what it actually means to do stuff in an open source fashion. You can get consulting. There's training opportunities, events, networking, webinars, and it brings together what could often be siloed communities of developers and business people. And that's what you get when you pay money to become a member of the Linux Foundation. And I think Alan's going to cover that a little bit later on. The Linux Foundation also runs projects. Okay, so the Penguin is just one of them. Right? There are many projects run by the Linux Foundation. You may recognize some of these, and the Hyperledger project is just one of them. It's just one of them. Okay, so lots of projects run in this governance scheme, run in this open source way. And in this talk, we are just going to talk about one of them, which is over here. So what is the project? So I was looking around for the dates, and many different sources have many different dates. So let's just pick one, December 2015. And the idea was to create a house. I think of it like as a big cardboard box into which various people can contribute different technologies. And there is a purpose to the box. It's an umbrella for open source blockchain and smart contract technologies. And after the initial discussions, they figured that there are three really important points about distributed ledger technologies. Firstly, the open, transparent governance of the development process. That matters. If you're going to create something that has value across industries, if you're going to create something in the open source manner, you need the open source governance of how you're going to develop that. The IP is very important, because if people go around creating their own versions of technologies with their own slightly different IP rights, then you get a mess of standards. And so I believe everything under the Linux Foundation's Hyperledger project is issued under Apache 2 license. So there's consistency on the intellectual property of the contributions. And then finally, there are key use cases emerging for this technology, and they're driving the models of the so-called permissioned chains or ledgers. And so out of that, the technical steering committee was created, and they decided that there are two initial contributions to the project that should be delivered under an incubation phase. So each project under the Linux Foundation has various stages of maturity. Incubation kind of means it's not ready yet. It goes into another phase when it becomes kind of production ready. And these are two which we'll touch on later. So IBM's contribution, Fabric, okay, and Intel's contribution, Sawtooth Lake. And they're two different views on what a distributed ledger for industry could look like. So under the Hyperledger, I've had to stamp project on all of this just so we're really clear on what we're talking about here. You've got the governance of how it's run, standards associated so important. If you're going to create interoperability between different ledgers, distributed ledgers, standards become important. And then you've got the various entities that can help implement this. Why does it exist? Why does the Hyperledger project exist? It exists to identify and address important features for a cross-industry open standard for distributed ledgers. So we're moving away from the word blockchain because, as far as I understand, none of the contributions have blocks in chains. Okay, and we've moved away from finance. This all started in bitcoins and finance, and actually this is talking about cross-industry, not just different industries, but cross-industry. So that's why standards and that's why collaboration is so critical in this. So this is, I think we're kind of almost reiterating the same point. This is focused on ledgers designed to support business transactions. It doesn't say payments, it doesn't say financial services transactions, it doesn't say equities or anything like that, or back office. This is business in general. And of course, finance is made, and supply chain. And the goal is to take what was originally from the blockchain space and make it useful for business. And of course, as we know from being in this space for a while, performance, reliability, scalability, interoperability, identity, all of these things matter, are important. And without a framework, it's very, very hard to create standards around these concepts. So this is back to my analogy of the cardboard box and kind of multicolored balls. There are independent efforts to develop these standards. They go into the box, but the point is all of these technologies, all of these contributions should interoperate at the most foundational levels to create something that's actually useful without having to bridge different technologies with kind of hacked together technology. So yes, are there different blockchains? Perhaps. Are there different distributed ledgers? Perhaps. Do they have different methods of agreement, consensus? Yes, perhaps. But the key point is they need to be interoperable. Okay.
Over to you. All right. Thanks, Anthony. So I think it would be helpful to just kind of touch on what the Hyperledger project is focusing on and what's not focusing on. So I think one of the things that really excited about the Hyperledger project itself is kind of similar to what Anthony talked about, which is this leveraging the open source, open standards approach and addressing not just a single industry solution, but attracting and targeting a range of different industry applications. So to do that, we basically need to focus on a very fundamental core part of the kind of problems that we're looking to solve. So in a way, the way we describe it is what's called critical is kind of analogous to the Linux kernel itself. So we're focusing on the core tenets of that, focusing on the execution environment, focusing on things like consensus framework, as well as the identity services, especially when you look at things like permission networks itself, and leave things like value-added systems, value-added services, things like dashboard, for example, specific user interfaces, for example, and industry-specific applications, for example, out of scope, and leave it such that it's pretty much open to individual companies to build innovations around this core kernel itself. So we break this down into further elaboration. One way to describe it is what we're seeing over here as the key building blocks in terms of what we think are the key foundations for the Hyperledger project itself. Starting from the left, we're looking at private permission network itself, looking at a way to actually manage identity as you onboard, for example, participants into this private permission network itself. Blockchain itself will be things like a pluggable consensus model. The idea is to select the appropriate consensus model in our view for the specific problems they're looking to solve. So how do we manage that? Of course, you need a way to communicate between the different nodes in this blockchain network itself. Call to this a distributed ledger itself, with its various implementation of that depending on the specific technology you're looking at. And ultimately, chain code, which basically is our interpretation of smart contracts. Yes. So I think it would be helpful to understand what does it mean to be a member of the Hyperledger project and what do you get out of it. So there are different types of membership. There's the premium members, the general members, as well as what we would call associate members. But let me talk about the premium and general members for a start. If you go into the Hyperledger project, I checked this morning, it's about 95 members today. And it's really mix of different players in the market, be it technology players, for example, like IBM, or a new age fintech company, for example, like R3, as well as banks, for example, like ANZ Bank, for example, as being represented. We have a nice picture over there that, after this that describes a snapshot of what those members are. But the idea is going back to the earlier point about cross-industry and open source standards, leveraging different types of industry applications. I think that's the mission of the project itself. So within the premier group of members, what you get being a premier group of members, you actually have representation on the board itself. And I'll talk about what it means to be on the board itself. To get onto the board, to be a premium member, you basically need to pay 250 grand per year. And as a general member, you could join, and that's much lower fee. The fee actually depends based on the size of your organization. So if you're a startup and you're looking to join with less than 50 members or 50 employees in the organization, you pay 5 grand. Whereas if you're a more established organization, you need to pay more. The benefit of being a member, again, is that you get to actually vote on the board rep. So that's a quick snapshot in terms of the membership. Of course, you could join as an associate member, contribute to the community. You don't have to pay any fee. And Anthony will talk about that towards the end. But those are the general construct. So as premium members, this is a snapshot of who are the premium members that we have today. R3, IBM, as well as technology players. Intel, for example, contributed the Sawtooth project, which Anthony talked about. So there's a construct, and I think we spoke about it earlier. One of the things that we're looking to address with the Hyperledger project is the addressing the problem of governance. So we think it's very important to have an open source, open standards, but ultimately an open governance, a robust governance model that lives beyond an individual developer or any individual in the community. That's why we place a lot of emphasis on having the right governance structure in place. And that's something that the Linux Foundation has done for years. So within the governing body, the governing board, Black Masters actually runs the governing board itself, and it's represented by the different members, the premium members that we spoke about earlier on. So we have representation from IBM, Chris Ferris, and R3 being represented, as well as the other premium members that we spoke about. So the next slide, we have, besides the governance body, we actually have a technical steering committee that meets every month and more regularly as needed. So they are the ones who set the technical standards for the committee itself. So for example, making a decision in terms of what projects get accepted, what goes into incubation phase, what gets promoted. That's something that the technical steering committee comes together to decide, right? And again, it's represented by different parties in the network itself, and then the industry itself. So we move on to the next slide. And beyond the governing body, the technical steering committee, on a day-to-day basis, we have a team that runs the Hyperledger project on a full-time basis. Who's a very established player, founder of the Apache web server in the earlier days. So there's a lot of things and experience that he takes in extending that to this project, as it's emerging as one of the fastest growing open source project in the industry. So this is just a snapshot of the other members in case you're wondering who's there. So some of the probably more common names like WinNet, for example. We have Wells Fargo representing one of the brands, in this case, NZ, for example. And there are a couple of others who are perhaps more startup, smaller ones that we may not be as familiar with.
What strikes me here is the side-by-side of the biggest, bluest chip companies in the world, right next to a kind of 2 or 3 man startup over there. There's Swift, which is meant to be disrupted or something according to some narratives. Right next to the disruptors, the guys who think that. I mean, it's a really, really interesting mix of companies who are all, I hope, collaborating to drive this technology forward. So I think this is a really powerful slide.
So the people on the payroll, are they developers or they are project managers?
I think there's a combination of contributors.
These guys are from the Linux Foundation, and for a project to be successful, you need people. Right? Projects just don't run themselves. So part of the money that the subscription fees goes towards keeping this up and running. Is that what you were?
So the question is, are these people developers or they are project managers?
These are project managers. A couple of developers. We've got a release engineer. Actually, on the web, I took this from the website this morning, so this is a live snapshot of what's going on. There's a ton of other information we'll touch on at the end, where you can find out more information about it.
But I guess just to be clear, the Linux Foundation or the Hyperledger project itself does not set itself up to be the organization that develops the code that goes into the project itself. It's meant to be open source, meaning that any one of us can actually contribute to the project itself, and that's what the project actually encourages. But I think to Anthony's point,
most developers are paid to do so.
What Brian actually spoke about was he actually would go to the individual companies that you see with here members and ask not necessarily for fees to join as members, but what he's really looking for is contributions from the respective technology companies to provide or lend expertise within the organization to contribute code to the project itself. So to the point about whether it's paid or not, I think it's up to the individual companies to incentivize, for example, individuals within the organization to contribute. But there's no motivation to say how many lines of code and you get X amount of dollars from the project itself. There's no.
I don't think contributors are paid to contribute.
No, there's no reward system for contribution yet.
Maybe, can you share the story of IBM's contribution?
Yeah. So what we did was again we looked at the blockchain as an emerging technology with huge potential. So we see that Hyperledger, it's not going to be something, or the fabric itself, whatever we've done, we see that as a Kickstarter, as a way to bootstrap the work that's done on distributed ledger. So what we've done is initially we've contributed 44,000 lines of code. We've contributed our IP in terms of the architecture as well to the project. But it's really as a Kickstarter, and we continue to contribute through Chris Ferris, who's chairing the technical steering committee, as well as other members within the respective committees as well. So that's where the Hyperledger fabric first started. Continue to improve and enhance on it. We're looking at the next generation of consensus, for example, towards the fabric project that takes some of the learnings that we've done, as well as both from IBM as well as the external community, to make this even more robust. So Sawtooth is another contribution from Intel. They introduced the idea of proof of elapsed time. So that's another innovation that they have brought to market.
At this juncture, if anyone knows anyone from Intel, please let us know. We tried really hard to get representation, but we couldn't find anyone.
So a couple of other contributions like Aruba that just came out, that's focused around mobile client applications. I think that's new. I think it'd be hard to find somebody there. But I'd say Aruba is inspired by Fabric. I think that's what I come to understand. So Anthony, you want to talk about Coda?
Coda, sure, thank you. So about a week ago, we announced R3, which is the company I represent, announced that they would be open sourcing Coda, which is something that we've been working on with our member banks. It's our take on what we think is the best distributed ledger technology and the one more. Now, IBM thinks there's the best, and Intel thinks there's the best, and this is a wonderful kind of melting pot of really, really great minds and great technology. I just really hope they're interoperable. Yeah. And they may end up being suitable for different industries. So Fabric may be great for one thing, Coda may be great for one thing, and Sawtooth later may be great for something else. But we've got to make them interoperate. So we announced that we'd be open sourcing the code to Coda of this month. It needs to be open source for a period of time before we can submit it into the project, the Hyperledger project, at which point it'll be one of the contributions, one of those balls in the cardboard box, one of the contributions that people can play with in true open source style. So just in terms of kind of the history and how we're thinking of this, initially it was thought that you could have one single code base to rule them all and be perfect for all use cases and all industries. And it turns out after a lot of toing and froing that probably was unlikely to be the case. So it turns out that different industries and different use cases require different kind of nuances on that technology. So right now, the current vision is to embrace the diversity of code bases, hence the different contributions with interoperability, commonality, and standards. How do you get there? It's facilitated through the project, which is a collaborative environment with common licensing and IP rules. Okay, so that's the real ethos of this project, and that's why. And maybe there'll be more contributions. But in terms of how do I get the data, how do I access this code? It's on GitHub. It's there. Okay, you go to github.com/Hyperledger project. Hyperledger, and you can start looking at, you can download these repos and you can contribute back to them. You don't have to be from IBM to contribute to Fabric. You don't have to be from Intel to contribute to Sawtooth Lake. It's the whole thing about open source. And I think if you kind of squint and look at it sideways, what was the one you mentioned? Aroha, yeah, that's somewhere there if you kind of squint. So it's all there, and R3's corner will be there somewhere. It's probably out in West or something, so it'll be in there for anyone to play with. In terms of us, people in this room, how do we get involved? Well, actually, there's a ton of resources in Linux Foundation open source style. You can get a lot of the things, a lot of the value that members get just by clicking on links. Okay, you can participate. What you don't get as a member of the non-paying public is voting rights or rights to be on the board. But what can you get? You can join the mailing list. I'm on a couple of mailing lists. I had to take myself off because I got too much stuff which I didn't understand. You can click on the wiki. There's a ton of information on the wiki. You can join Slack if you don't have enough Slacks. You can dial into the working group meetings, right? You can participate in them. You can search for bugs, you can contribute to the code base. This one says contact us to organize a Hyperledger meetup. Welcome to Singapore's inaugural Hyperledger project meetup. And I think that brings us to the end. Now, we've got a ton of time. So there are two things. Firstly, what do you want to, well, maybe we'll take a break, maybe we'll go straight into the next session. Firstly, what do you want, and I'll do questions in a second. What do you want from this series of meetups? We want to know how frequently you want them. Do you want them to be tech? Do you want them to be business, use case related? What do you want from, firstly today, from the second half of today, and secondly, the cadence of future meetups. I'm going to bring in Richard Brown, R3 CTO, to talk about Corner and give a demo. That will probably happen around mid-January. In the meantime, IBM could present on Fabric. If Intel exists in Singapore, we could have someone talk about Sawtooth Lake. There's a bunch of stuff we could do. It's our meetup, so we can discuss what we want to do. Was there a question?
One point to add, maybe. Something that Hyperledger is doing, and we collectively should do our homework, is organizing Hyperledger project level hackathons. It's not about Fabric or Sawtooth Lake. They want to actually develop prototypes in 24-48 hours, which takes a consensus algorithm from Fabric, membership services from Sawtooth Lake, and things like that, and show that that can work, because everyone follows that template architecture that Alan talked about. A possibility once, when Corda is going to be available soon, something like that, maybe we can look at that next year.
Great. Yep. Right.
I just had a question on the fees. So, do they annual fees or do they want
annual fees? And in order to participate in the project, in order to pay the fees for the project, you've got to pay to be a member of the Linux Foundation.
That's
first.
the prerequisite.
There's a couple of layers of fees. I wish we could have someone from the Linux Foundation explain more about it.
It was not clear to me. So do the developers need to pay to be able to start using it or to productionize? At what point, if I'm a developer who wants to use this, what point do I need to pay?
No, you don't have to pay anything. What we talk about is just the general members for voting rights and the premium members will be on the board. You could go today to github.com/Hyperledger and get your hands on with any of the projects that are out there.
So this code base has been contributed to the Hyperledger project under I believe all of it is under, I'm not sure about this, but I believe all of it's under Apache 2 open source license, which means it's pretty permissive. You can do what you want with that code. There's no gates.
One question I have, I'm not very familiar with the old open source projects and how did they collaborate, but did they have technical steering committees like you have in Hyperledger, or is this an attempt? I mean, because I'm looking at this, I'm not belittling the work that has been done, but I'm getting a feeling that this is an attempt by the big consulting companies to somehow jump on the bandwagon of the open source they missed over last 20 years.
I actually don't have an answer. I haven't.
So, like, let's say Linux, did they have like a technical steering committee of? Yeah, they do that.
So for example,
like
Linux.
Accenture, IBM, or who were they, and what kind of composition they
So
had?
Linux 25 years ago was a bunch of individuals.
Okay.
Linux Torvald and those kind of guys. The name obviously. There was no foundation at that point.
Yeah.
The Linux Foundation did not exist because we were talking about the early days of Linux and open source in general. So of course there was a quote-unquote steering committee. Everything was decided over fights on mailing lists and things like that.
Yeah.
Today fights happen probably in these governing board meetings, whatever. Those things still happen. So yes, there large open source projects always have steering committees. Then maybe they are not called steering committees.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a way to structure ourselves. Yeah.
So go to the second slide.
Second slide, yeah.
This is the first slide.
Okay, we have the second, well, you had the topology of what is what, the boxes.
I think it's the next one.
The next one.
Oh, the this one.
Yeah. And now if I look at this box and the three, the instances of Hyperledger that we have, I would call it like IBM's Fabric, R3.
This is what I asked you at the beginning, right?
Yeah. R3 is like having Corda and like Intel as well. So where exactly do these three differ and why?
This is really a reference architecture, and we build against that. Each implementation would have their own instantiation of each of these components. So, for example, from a Hyperledger Fabric perspective, we have our own instance of what it means for distributed ledger. We have our own implementation. For example, chain code for Fabric is written in Go, for example. That's our implementation of this reference architecture. Some instantiation of that, or interpretation of this reference architecture. It's not meant to be a like for like.
Yeah, it's more of a template.
But it's good enough logical kind of breakdown of Hyperledger.
Yeah, and this was taken from a July presentation, so things could have evolved.
Right. If I change my question slightly, and if I say, why these three products, if they are so different, are still called like offshoots of Hyperledger? What's so common between these three? Except for blockchain technology, between Corda and Fabric.
So I think this kind of framework is the commonality between them. How they deal with each of these boxes, how they deal with what they call this, how they deal with that is probably where the nuances are at a high level.
I think exactly.
But come to the Richard Brown talk in January. He'll give you a really good answer.
Yeah, because what I'm worried about is like tomorrow we have these new instances coming up, probably up.
Or maybe we need to have that as a meetup. We need to get experts in from each of the technologies and just have a face-off saying, my chain code is better than yours.
Well, the foundation has to set down some minimum.
I guess the question really is, what are some of the unique characteristics of each of those instances? Right? Say, doing face-off over here, maybe. If we describe it, we haven't quite figured out what use cases are or where the strengths are and so forth. Do we know that yet, or is this still really important?
I don't personally know that from a technical point of view. It's something we could do for future events.
I think I think these are as far as high level. I think in terms of what are the blocks that each of the different implementations would have. They would have some of these elements there, but in terms of the exact difference between, let's say, Sawtooth, Fabric, and all that, I think that's an interesting discussion that we should definitely have representation from different technology contributors stand up and present a point of view, and we could have a debate about that.
I think that's trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
It's so the question really comes out there. Are there advantages, disadvantages for each
Yeah.
of those instances to kind of
Yeah.
present about that? And I'm just asking the room in general, perhaps there's some understanding of that within this group in terms of where the advantages are.
And what we could do right now is we have an expert here who can. I'm going to put you on the spot.
I'm not an expert.
And possibly you could show us the difference between Ethereum public and Fabric. Is that something you're happy to show people now?
That's one.
Yeah.
Second is I can show you a demo of my company's product.
So I think that would be interesting because last time you mentioned that your contracts are kind of technology agnostic. They will work anywhere. This place to kind of
That's 6 months down the line. V1.0, just like Fabric.
So should close this.
Right. So I think we should close this, but I think what when Anthony and I spoke, I think what we wanted to do for this first presentation of the inaugural meeting was just to set a context on what the mission is for Hyperledger project, and then what we envision is that subsequently we could deep dive into specific technology areas, and then we could have a lively debate, right? As we would definitely like to hear your feedback. You know, each as the meetup organizer, very keen to understand, you know, whether your interest is more in terms of the business model, in terms of actually showing live code, for example, for specific projects and examples. I think those feedback will be very helpful to plan out the next couple of meetups. With that, I'll hand it back to Rich. Yeah.
Okay. Right, so I'm supposed to extend you guys a jokes while he sets up. So I think a few things here, just a show of hands. How many of you actually develop and write code? Awesome. So I think that is also the direction I'd like to take this meetup as well. To have people who dev and code for business people, please learn to code. Right? Because I think in my line of work, it's become increasingly frustrating that business users do not understand code, they do not understand development. But at the same time, they expect people to create flying cars out of bits. So, are we almost done? I'm running out of jokes now. And so I really think that, you know, if you have a topic, if you have speakers to introduce, or even better, if you have venue that comes with free pizza apart from PayPal, please come talk to me, and we'll try to make things happen. So this is really the first step, and we will try to make things better as we go along. So for the meetups that I've organized, that's normally the model that we run on.
Like, what's your contact?
I'll share my Twitter handle later.
Okay.
More jokes.
Okay, so anyways, just to show. Yes. Yes, I did. I'm rich. Yes, I work for IBM.
Besides that,
what else?
Oh, you're too humble. You organize how many meetups?
So I think some folks here like Paul, he's standing for some of my meetups, or Kim Long, I think they're around here as well. So I run the data science meetup as well. You might have seen me if you're there. I also run the product tank meetup, which is a product management meetup. I also run the Docker meetup. So if any one of you has anything to say about any of these topics, you can come up to me. Yeah. Of course, there's Hyperledger.
So where's the focus then? Like if you're focusing on so many things. Like
So I'm the administrator, I'm the bean counter to make sure that we get venues.
The bean counter.
I'm the bean counter.
What does it mean?
So I look at Excel. Is this Hyperledger meetup making money from all the pizza that we're having? I'm kidding.
Passion, right?
It's okay. I think running meetups is good because give back and hopefully the community can learn from each other. I think that's normally the case. If you guys have anything to share, we always encourage you guys to share with the community so everybody learns bit by bit.
so if I can ask you, what, based on the different meetups that you have, what are some of the characteristics of more successful meetups?
So the characteristic so far is that people definitely want to see live code. Sometimes it doesn't really work. Sometimes the Wi-Fi just sucks. And you have to figure out how to do things, even though things fail. And I think that's the challenge for the speakers. And that's what makes it fun. You know, either to boo them or to see how they solve the problem live. Anytime I think in terms of the meetups, once the community gets going and people who are interested stay, people who are not interested leave, then you have a core group within the community that grows, and hopefully within Singapore we have enough people in the Hyperledger project to contribute to the code. And then we have a support group of people who can contribute together. So there's actually a lot of people from IBM research. Raise your hands. Yeah, disturb them. So these are some of the folks I believe they're contributing to Fabric, Hyperledger Fabric. If all of you are free at some point of time, maybe you can drop by IBM office. We're a bit different now. Not advertising for IBM. Okay? Trying to stay as vendor agnostic as possible. If you want to visit our free, yes, there's Anthony.
We'll have an office next week.
Now he's asking me. I'm done with the jokes. All right, thanks. Over to you.
Hey guys, so I'm Gaurav. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Taurus. We are a smart contracts as a service company. I'm also the co-organizer of the Ethereum Singapore Meetup, along with guys from Autonomous sitting at the back. Mano is one of the best Ethereum developers in Singapore. Yeah. Anyway, so today, we organized this Hyperledger Meetup. Earlier, we wanted to have a fireside chat about differences between Ethereum and Hyperledger. So now I'm going to show you a demo, hands-on demo, about how to get started with Hyperledger. So before 1 month, I met the team at Hyperledger, Shantanu and Fabian. These guys explained me Hyperledger Fabric in like 1 hour, and it was a great explanation. So I got down to it. I set up some nodes. I started the machines, and yeah, I could get onto it. So what I found out was that, so when I started with Ethereum last year, it was a bit difficult. You know, at that time, it didn't have a lot of documentation. This was back in March or April last year, and Mano might understand. Like, you know, last year it was quite messy. Even after that, to get started with Ethereum, you had to learn a new language to write the smart contract, which is called Solidity. But in Hyperledger this year, these guys, you can write smart contracts in Go language, which is Golang. It's called Golang sometimes. It's quite easy. So yeah, let me take you through it. I have written a guide on Medium. You guys can take a look at this as well.
So you're demonstrating Fabric, right?
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll go through the getting started guide with how to get started with Hyperledger. At the same time, I'll try to contrast Hyperledger and Ethereum.
So is this Hyperledger or is this Fabric? Because I'm really
sorry.
So there's the IBM Fabric, there's a Hyperledger Fabric.
So just a disclaimer. So now whenever I say Hyperledger, I mean Hyperledger Fabric.
So is it Fabric? Is it
Fabric.
IBM Fabric brings the layers on top that make Hyperledger usable.
Okay, I'll tell you. So these guys try to explain it. So Hyperledger is the box. IBM has one of the implementations of Hyperledger, which is called Fabric. And Intel has provided one more implementation, which is called Sawtooth.
Okay, so Hyperledger is the kernel, and IBM has created some implementation project.
Okay. Different people are trying to shape the Hyperledger project. So at this point in time,
so Fabric is one of the implementations in which you can actually literally just use it. One of the implementations in which you can literally just use it out of the box.
Almost. If you follow my guide, you can set it up within 1 hour, less than 1 hour, and start using it just like that.
Oh, that's put in the CV. I know Hyperledger Fabric.
Yeah.
Yes. That's not useful. I think we have to rewind a little bit. Yeah, level set a little bit to what Hyperledger is, what Fabric is, what core is, and so forth. It might be basic for some, but it might be useful for somebody else can level set. Is somebody going to do that?
Okay, let me draw it quickly. So, Anthony, please correct me if I'm wrong. Do you want to understand what is the Pada, what is Hyperledger, what is Fabric? Maybe you can speak more.
January. Well, I think again, let's see
Well, maybe I can take a shot. So I'm So I'm Shantanu from IBM. Hyperledger is a project. It's a bunch of guys who pay money to define the technical direction of blockchain. There's no single line of code in Hyperledger. It's a hosting site. It's a facility where people come together, companies like R3, IBM, and others come together. That's it. That's what Hyperledger project is. And Alan explained earlier. The whole confusion, and IBM is responsible for this confusion, is IBM's contribution of source code, 44,000 lines or whatever, is called Hyperledger Fabric. Sometimes people drop the name Fabric. It comes, IBM's Hyperledger and things like that. So the thing is, Hyperledger project is this construct under the Linux Foundation to define standards and governance around how blockchain development will happen across industries and things like that. There's another thing, the other standards organization which exists is, of course, ISO. There is a technical committee defined called 307 for blockchain and distributed ledgers. They have never met yet. Their first meeting is in April 2017. Okay, so this is a very early stage technology, but at the same time, people like IBM, R3, Intel are serious about it. Their own contributions of this technology are respectively called Fabric, IBM, Corda, R3, Sawtooth Lake, Intel. What you saw in that snapshot of GitHub is you can download today 2 of these 3, soon Corda. These are the specific implementations to your point. There is nothing called just Hyperledger. There is no kernel called Hyperledger. Hyperledger is a governance structure.
And do they follow some kind of standards?
Yes, whatever the Linux Foundation, or there's a specific process in which you do open source development. How do you do licensing and things like that? Okay, how do you define a steering committee, a governance board? What do these guys do when they meet? Right, so, that's what the Linux Foundation did.
So the other question, right? Are the different implementations interoperable? It's tongue tripping. I can't pronounce it. So you know what?
Yes, they. I mean, they are designed to be
interoperable out of the box right now. The aim is to make them interoperable as they develop.
So
right now they're 2 separate technologies that don't talk to each other, but they will do.
What some of these Hyperledger hackathons try to do is experiment with that and see whether you can actually take some component from Fabric, some component from Sawtooth Lake, some component from other things like Corda when they will be available, and see interoperability. See, you have to realize that this is very early in this technology to talk about interoperability. All these guys understand that interoperability will be critical to success eventually. Right? There's not going to be one permission blockchain to rule them all. There will be a web of blockchains. So everyone understands the importance of things like interoperability. It is being worked on. That's all we can say at this point in time. And be correct.
And I think the terminology that I've heard a couple of times, 3 separate implementations of Hyperledger is misleading.
Yes.
Because that assumes that Hyperledger is a set of protocols which are implemented in 3 different languages or something like that. That is not the case. Okay? They are not implementations of Hyperledger.
A quick question about digital asset flow and the Hyperledger, which is the project that won cycles last year. What is the connection?
Okay. Okay, so Hyperledger was a startup which won Cybos, Tribe, and all those things. That in turn was kind of acquired by Digital Asset Holdings.
Yes.
And what Digital Asset Holdings donated to the Linux Foundation was the name Hyperledger.
But not the code.
But not the code. Okay, so Hyperledger, the name comes from that startup which won Cybos last year. And because when this Linux Foundation project started, it was called, I think, Open Fabric or something.
Open Blockchain.
Open Blockchain. Open Blockchain was the name of the project when it started in December last year. I think around Feb they did the rebranding and called it the Hyperledger project. And I think that's a good diagram that Gaurang is drawing there. Hyperledger is this, maybe consortium is not the right word, but you saw a lot of logos of companies, right? It's like maybe a consortium of consortiums or whatever, right? So it's a set of companies which are governed in the Linux Foundation style. That is Hyperledger. The specific contributions by those companies are respectively called Fabric, Corda, Sawtooth, and so on. And there has been confusion traditionally that IBM's contribution is called Hyperledger Fabric, which is messy. But I think now that should be very clear, at least to people in this room, that unintentionally, when even Gaurang was talking, Ethereum versus Hyperledger, he was actually meaning Fabric.
I would just drop the word. I'd say the project or Fabric.
I agree. Yeah.
Now to
to add to the confusion, Hyperledger is a blockchain. No. It's supposed to be a blockchain. Again, the blockchain started with Bitcoin. Then you had Ethereum, which is a public permissionless blockchain. And now you have Hyperledger, which is a private consortium permissioned blockchain. So both of them have different use cases. Ethereum is mainly used for small projects which want to be open source, and the data can be public. But mainly banks or financial institutions who want to build blockchain projects or blockchain products, they generally tend to avoid open source projects. So they would go with Hyperledger mostly, I would say. That's the any questions on this?
Well, you could draw the Bitcoin. Another way. So it's a big on blockchain, the other one. Yeah.
You can have many more blockchains here.
Yeah, a lot of coins around, right? So there are quite a few coins around.
Well, that'll be under, yeah.
I received emails just to try to get me to buy more coins.
It comes now.
So again, Bitcoin has its own coin called Bitcoin. Blockchain has its coin called Bitcoin. Ethereum has Ether. Yeah.
Do you know to what extent things like for sorcery, so do you know to what extent they are distinct from, because like you said, Bitcoin and Ethereum open source.
Yep.
So are those pieces of software derived from Ethereum or have people just looked at the open source implementations and gone, that's a good idea, that's a good idea, that's a good idea, but I'm going to implement it from scratch.
So now the I would say similarity and the difference between Hyperledger, Fabric, and Ethereum maybe is that and Bitcoin, they use consensus algorithms.
Yeah.
They have blocks, they have chain, they have blocks which are connected with each other. The transactions are not editable. Now Accenture is building an editable blockchain. I don't know why they're doing it. But yeah. So yeah, the basic premise is the same, but I don't think they just copied the code.
The designs are completely different.
Yeah.
Okay. The fundamental difference, if you want to catch one fundamental difference, it is the bottom two, Bitcoin and Ethereum, are supposed to have open membership. You can run it. So when you want to, so it's a philosophical difference there. Okay. So open membership versus closed membership. Right. So open membership is anybody can run their own node. That has other consequences, such as a grand total of 7 transactions per second. Okay. Because you want now support thousands and thousands of nodes in Bitcoin and also in Ethereum. Right. And also, more importantly, eventual hopeful consistency. Right. Wherein you may not, I mean, you don't have transaction finality in Bitcoin or Ethereum. You just hope that, okay, 6 confirmations are enough or whatever, right? So you need to be able, so the proposition of Hyperledger Fabric and Corda and so on, everything under, okay, let me not overshoot that. The proposition here with closed membership blockchain is that there are several organizations, several businesses, which would want to have a definite common history of events, right? And if, for example, there are 50 organizations or 100 organizations, if they have an ability to maintain a common history of events, of their transactions, whatever, right? Without a central body that provides that particular service for them, because in many cases they don't want that, right? That is very useful, because what you would end up with is a situation where you would have to have legal recourses. I mean, these organizations have a lot of problems, in the sense they have to go to the courts all the time to resolve disputes, right? Because you don't know what happened first, and so on. Those are some very interesting points. So once you get a common history across all these organizations, the same chain of events, right? The same temper evidence log is replicated everywhere in these organizations. So you achieve
a qualitative difference, right? And that's the proposition of a permission blockchain with a fixed number of zones and governance and motions. So that's the qualitative difference that I want to.
The question was actually, is fabric, for example, they're derived from Bitcoin?
So since this particular distinction exists, open membership and closed membership, kind of consensus that works in one doesn't work in another. Chain of blocks, that's called. You need to have a chain of blocks.
You need to have validations, you have consensus.
So for this one, so for users not you distributed device, I use blockchain.
So yeah, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. So your question was, let me repeat it. If you have a database, why do you need a blockchain? Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So now, just imagine a scenario where you have two banks. These banks won't open up databases and share the information with each other. But take an example of a marine, or maybe like a letter of credit or any document, or suppose an invoice. You are a business, you get an invoice, you get a financing on that invoice. Then you take the same invoice and go to another bank. How does the bank B know that bank A has financed that invoice? Because they won't open up the databases. In this case, if you put the invoice on the blockchain, what you can do is bank can open up very selective data and they can work on the same data very selectively. That's where blockchain comes in. It's only one of the use cases.
You're asking why would you have that replicated database? Right. Sure, but that it could end. The effort that we are doing might end up over there, but it will not be from the same. I mean, today's replicated database is centrally managed, right? That's the key distinction. I mean, like, it's one of the distinctions, right? You don't want blockchain to be centrally managed. You don't want one part of it. So
the key philosophy of blockchain is decentralization, the peer-to-peer nature of the blockchain. Now just imagine you write a smart contract, you write a piece of code which runs not only on your computer, not only on your laptop, but it runs on the entire network. So your code is being compiled by someone sitting in Ukraine, or someone sitting in Russia, or someone sitting in US. That's really phenomenal.
This one is correct for Ethereum. From the architecture fabric, the chain code is separate from the blockchain, right?
No,
It's completely separate.
No, we're just expressing it as different components. Fundamentally, the concept is still the same.
Yeah, that's what I'll show it to you in my demo.
Yep.
How it differs from what does chain code mean? How it differs from a smart contract.
Emphasizing the idea of a centralized distributed database. That doesn't change.
Because in Ethereum, the code you put the code inside the blockchain, right? But for the fabric, you put the code into a separate container, right?
No,
inside the blockchain.
No. I'll show you.
Yeah.
It's not in a separate container.
The diagram is just expressing these are the different components. We're not saying that these are all individual containers necessarily. We're just describing that these are different components as a reference architecture.
Okay, guys. So
Yeah,
let me get started with the guide. So this guide is for Ubuntu users. So what I have done is, first of all, I set up a virtual machine. Ubuntu virtual machine. You just go there, update your package manager, Docker images. So on Docker, there's a guy called Easy, I think. So this guy has set up the Fabric Docker images. You just download those images and start the machines. So now, when I say I was going to contrast Hyperledger and Ethereum, in Ethereum it's called a smart contract. In Fabric it's called a chain code. In Ethereum you have a consensus algorithm. I don't know which is the exact algorithm. Do you know which is the exact algorithm? No, but what's the algorithm we have to use? In what? Anyway, so in Fabric you have you have two algorithms. One, you can have nukes, which doesn't have any validations for the transactions, and second is PVFT, which is Byzantine fault tolerance. So when you're starting your blockchain and your nodes, you can start it in any one of these two configurations. Okay. So Let me show you how it is done. So this is my Ubuntu machine. So I have already downloaded the Docker images. So I go to it. I go to this folder and I just use Docker Compose. So what it is doing essentially is, I'll show you the Docker. So here it has started 4 Docker containers. Okay. So as you can see, it has started 4 Docker containers. These are actually Fabric nodes, Fabric peer nodes, and these are connected with each other. Each of them is a validating node, and it is validating using the PBFT consensus algorithm. Now I can enter one of these nodes, one of these containers. Now I am in a container. So there is some problem here, I think. Anyway, so now there is this chain code which is. So now usually in Fabric chain code there are 3 steps. One is deploy, invoke, and query. So this is a very simple example in which I don't know if you can see that properly.
The image is so bad.
Sorry?
How come the image is so bad?
Yeah.
Check the display. Like resolution.
It's usually a lot better than this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in here you're initializing 4 variables, and when you invoke that code, you're just invoking those variables and changing the values from one variable to another. You're just changing the value of the variables. Okay. So let me show you how that works. So you enter this command, which is called peer chain code deploy. You give a name to the this thing deployment transaction. You enter the variables here. Okay, so when you when you enter that command, what happens is the Hyperledger nodes get that command. They try to deploy a chain code and execute the chain code. So there was some problem here. But what I'm trying to show here is that command. What happens is so what I'm trying to show is the Docker images, they create 4 nodes, and you can deploy the chain code to any one of those nodes, and it gets validated and put on the blockchain. So just like Ethereum, then you can go back and check the blockchain transaction. You can check the number of the blocks. You can check on which block this transaction was validated, all these things. But I don't think that Fabric keeps on creating empty blocks, does it? No, right? Does it keep on?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it doesn't. So
So when you deploy the code, why the code store? Deploy the chain code into the blockchain. Why the code is stored?
So are you asking whether this particular chain code has its own Docker container? Yeah, that is true.
So whenever you deploy this code, it actually creates a Docker container, runs the code in that, executes in that, and then.
So how much is as a thing?
Sorry. Yeah, it is there or not.
So we have a copy of it.
So yeah. So it might look a little funny right now. I'll change.
So when that code gets deployed, you get a name for that, and you can use that subsequent commands to invoke and query that code. So yeah, this was a bit technical. Now let me go ahead and show you a live demo of my product, which is called Atorus. So
just saw you. I saw the GitHub, right? What's inside the GitHub?
Yeah, so in that GitHub, that's the fabric code. So what I'm doing is when I say deploy here, I'm pulling that chain code and deploying that on the node.
What language is it written in?
Sorry?
What's the language?
It's written in Go language.
Go.
Go language. So this is just one example of how it works. Now what you can do is, when this node is running on the Docker, you can connect to this node using a gRPC, and then you can build a web application on top of this. So instead of putting commands like this one by one, you can have all these commands in your web application itself, and you can automate a lot of these things. So now I'll show you what I'm doing with Ethereum. I have a similar architecture where I have an Ethereum node running, and I have a web application. So when you're using my application, you don't even know that you're using blockchain. So I have tried to abstract away the entire blockchain piece, the entire code like this, and I'll show you how it works. So, David, can you help me? So now David will go to dashboard.atorus.com. So what we have is, we have a digital signing solution. Just log in.
Yeah.
Log in.
Oh. Control Z on this one.
Come on, please.
Do it on my account.
Yeah, so what we do is, we have a digital signing solution where you can upload your own PDFs and sign them digitally on the blockchain. So every signature gets logged on the blockchain as a transaction. So it is similar to DocuSign, but in case of DocuSign, they have their own PKI, public key infrastructure. But in our case, we are using blockchain as that PKI essentially. Okay, so now he's on the dashboard. You can go and upload a document. Go to downloads. Yeah. So now he will go ahead and upload this document. He can do it as in-person signing, or he can add other signers to this as well. So now David, you can, okay. So when he uploads the document, I'm uploading the document, I'm getting hash of the document, and I'm displaying the hash here. Sorry?
Change the screen size. Can you adjust the browser size? Just Control Shift up and down over there.
Okay. So what you can see here is the hash of the PDF. The signing part is to this, and you can see the actual document on the right hand side. Two options: either type the signature or draw the signature. So David will type the signature because his handwriting is bad.
Very true.
Now you can go ahead and place the signature anywhere on the document. So when you say clicks the button, you have an option to finalize the signature. When you see finalize the signature, what I'm doing is I'm taking the hash of this PDF, I'm putting that in a transaction, and I'm sending that transaction on the blockchain. So that at this point the transaction gets logged on the blockchain with a timestamp and with the public key of this person, the signer, so that the signer can't repudiate that he has signed this document. So when you click on the person's name, you can see all the information about the signature. You can see the contract address to which the transaction was sent. You can see the transaction hash, And now if David goes to testnet.etherscan.io, which is a block explorer, just like Google for blockchain, and he pastes the transaction hash there, he can see all the information about this transaction. So I hope Fabric also has some blockchain explorer, and they're building something, I guess. I read something about it. Anyway, so other blockchains will have it. I hope so. So this is the transaction hash at the top. This is the block height on which this block will be mined. This is from the signer, and this is to the smart contract. And this is the data that is sent with the transaction, which is in hex code right now. So, so the beauty of this is that you can sign the document and not trust us, and know that your signature is going to be there. So you sign using Etorus, but you verify using the blockchain. That's my pitch. Thank you. Any questions?
So the demo literally costs money?
Yeah, so this is a testnet right now. I'm using testnet so that I don't want to spend money.
Oh, this is a demo.
Yeah, this is a testnet. Testnet Ethereum. Test blockchain. So it is same like the public blockchain, but the Ether doesn't hold any value.
So what you've written into the Ethereum blockchain itself is the process of actually signing the document.
Yes.
Is the document also written in the blockchain?
No.
You can decouple the two forms.
I am sending the hash of the block document with the transaction. So this data
is a full hash of the full document.
Yes, full document. So now next time when you want to verify that the document was signed, you will hash the document and check the hash with the hash from the transaction.
So I have one question. You assign 4 containers. In this case, you probably run a node on your laptop, right? Yeah. Ethereum network, right?
For the Ethereum, I'm running a node on Amazon.
Yeah. So just now you assign 4 nodes, 4 containers.
Yeah.
When you talk about permission, for example, an organization has a simple insurance company has 300 PCs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you then assign 300 containers on those physical machines?
No, you don't need 300 containers. You can.
Because you're talking. What I'm trying to understand is the directive with respect to Hyperledger, right? In shipping, someone is going to publish this to everybody. It's permission based. Exactly. So you assign a node to people who you can have permission.
Yes.
So while I can have permission to my company computers, I can also give permission to another equivalent financial institute.
Yes.
Right. Therefore, I can have containers that are distributed across different organizations, right? But it's not a DAO, it's not a DAO, right? And because of that, I'm not like Ethereum where you have 7,000 nodes today, anybody can get nodes. So I'm just trying to understand, technically, you're still using cryptography, you're still using the necessary signing technologies as far as that is concerned. The only thing is how to become consensus.
Yes, exactly. So in case of Fabric or Hyperledger, you can have in your shipping company or multiple nodes in your n number of nodes in your shipping company. You can have some nodes in a bank. You can have some nodes in a customs office, and all of them will have the same copy of the blockchain. Again, in Fabric, there's one great concept called access control. So you can have some nodes which can just participate in the blockchain, so which will have only the copy of the blockchain. Some will be the validating peers. They can validate the transactions. Some of them will just be able to enter the transactions, like many levels like this. And I think that's why I love Fabric, because I really like that.
So, for example, if let's say there's a benefit of anchoring, right? Anchoring, right? So potentially Hyperledger, people will vote on it to say, yeah, some anchoring, especially for extranet kind of, just like you say, shipping and the relevant parties and make up a community.
Yeah,
itself for the whole interest itself.
The from ID is the Ethereum ID of Etorus or the user?
So for the demo, what we're doing is we have Etorus ID, we're just signing that. But again, in the transaction, I'm also sending the email ID and the hash of the PDF. So every transaction has the email ID of the signer, essentially.
Where is the ID of the signer? What is the Etorus ID of the signer?
This is the Atoros ID, and the Atoros ID of the signer is in the input in the transaction.
So what does your contract look like? Is it just maintaining different hashes?
Yeah, exactly. It's maintaining different. It has a data structure where it maintains different hashes in the emails of the people who have signed the document with the timestamp.
You can just add another.
Yeah, I just keep adding to that data structure.
So you're not validating the contract, you're just validating the hash of that contract, the PDF.
Yeah.
So you're not storing the PDF.
No, I'm not storing the PDF. So you're uploading the PDF, it gets into my S3 document itself, the PDF itself, and storing it in an encrypted format.
And how would you, let's say if there's a claim saying that I haven't signed this, like how would I be able to dispute?
Yeah, so then I'm right now building a verification page. So you can upload your PDF, and then I will tell you when this was signed, by whom it was signed. On blockchain, you can decode the code and do it by yourself.
I'm just like trying to understand, like, do you just validate the hash for the actual document?
The hash. But if you upload your PDF, and the hash will be the same. So
many other documents who would have the same hash.
No.
Very difficult to create a
hash is really probabilistic.
Okay.
One document is going to have only one.
So how do you manage identity?
Yeah, so actually we have a couple of different products. For banking and shipping industry, we have a marine cargo policy where we convert the contract into a smart contract. For that, we have seed. So every signer will have his own public key and seed using which he can sign it.
And where is that from?
The person will own
on your system.
No. In case of the banks, we don't hold any of the public key and private keys. The banks will sign it using their own public key. The transaction, the signature of the transactions will be done in the browser. In that case.
Okay, but then how do you know? How can someone prove that this has been signed by me? I mean, anyone could give my email ID and sign the document, right?
In this case, yeah. So in this case, we are depending on so only when you log in, then you can sign it. So we are depending on the email two-factor authentication. You have a two-factor authentication using which you can use Google Authenticator or any of those apps.
Sign 77,
But then you'll get an email on your email ID, and then you won't be able to verify that.
You still can't replace a human element, right? So
Yeah.
there has to be a KYC at some point. Somebody has to verify your identity. So then you cannot replace it. Unless you have something more complex like proof of identification, automated proof of identification with regards to OCR on your passport copy or proof of address where it automatically send your home and then you retrieve the document, scan it.
Or you already have a signature elsewhere.
Exactly. So you still have the ID verified.
And yeah, even like DocuSign and all other industry standard digital signing solutions, they still rely on the email ID currently. So that's the industry standard right now. Any other questions?
Cool. Bring another implementation for all countries. Is there a page to check it independently, like there is one for in investment?
Yeah. For what?
For Fabric also you can independently check it.
No, see, Fabric, the blockchain is going to be private, right? So
Yeah.
you can't have a public page for that.
Yeah.
So I think the people who are maintaining the blockchain, the consortium, they can build it, or maybe even have an open standard at some point of time. You can just. I was just discussing that with David today. So you should have something like that for a private blockchain.
But I think we should also not confuse the fact that Ethereum is meant for public
Yes.
use case. Hyperledger is meant, Fabric is meant for a private use case. We have two different use cases, hence two different consensus protocols.
Different validated.
This is an interesting point. Because if this were a Bitcoin trade, if this were on Block Explorer or so this isn't a Bitcoin transaction. But actually make lots more sense out of it. People say before the input transaction, they got more than the output transaction. What can you tell over here? There's nothing to be. The point is that the fact that
provides you the flexibility to write any algebraic code, right? Prevents you from actually writing an effective block explorer. It doesn't give you anything. What is this? This is a string, I don't know what it is. Zero something. So the utility of this is that I would challenge the utility of this.
Block Explorer gives you a lot of information. If you put data, for instance, you can decompose.
Yeah, you can just take that and convert to it.
Yeah, you can decompose that.
Oh yeah, but what happened?
So, but see, Prahlad, you can directly go to the smart contract and see that. So, from my command line interface, CLI, I can directly query the smart contract. I can even look at the storage of the smart contract. It's public. You can just,
So let's save this for another meetup. I need more material. So we'll close this off, and as promised to the gentleman, I'll just give you guys my Twitter account, so you guys can't spam me for more than 140 characters, right?
Can you post your Medium link to the Meetup then?
yeah, sure, I can post it in the comments.
Next.
Yes.
Yeah, that's me. If you find Snoopy, you found the right page.
The guy?
Oh no, that's the guy. All right. Thanks for coming down. If you have any suggestion, I'll be staying for a while. I think Anthony has to rush up for a conference call. Leave any trash. Thank you, PayPal, for the venue, and Taurus. There was another lady who was helping with this. She's based in the US. So thank you very much. Good night.